Well, I mean, I guess I could just simply say my name's James Chambers, and I'm a grateful recovering addict. Because my addiction went on for so long, I think it kind of depends on where you stood to describe a day. I mean, I was a pretty high functioning addict for a long time. And so standing on the outside, someone would have thought for a long time that I had a great life. You know, I had I had a good family, two great kids, had a nice house, I had nice vehicles, I was coaching hockey, I was a member of the community, I had a good career, and I had all the things that we're supposed to want. But my but I was a big drinker for a long time. I was like a legendary partier for a long time, and then eventually it progressed. And as time went on, but at the end of it, before I decided to get into recovery, like a day of addiction for me was just do whatever it took to get and to use. I was forced on disability from my employer because of my issues. I wasn't showing up to work and stuff like that. I had lost my family, I lost the house, I lost everything. And so I just found myself, I rented a little bungalow, and I allowed anyone in there who would use with me or bring drugs, and when my house money ran out, my disability money ran out, and it was just like, well, okay, what do I got to do to get some cash, right? So it all centered around getting and using, and then there was a lot of pain in between there, right? I was miserable. I hated everything about my life. I hated everything about myself. And, even though at that point the drugs really didn't do a good job of what I wanted them to do, but that's how I attempted at least to get rid of that pain and that self-hatred. Well, again, I think I'd had a few moments along the way where I knew things had to change, and I made subtle changes, none of which were ever really giving it up. But when I knew I had to give it up, there was a friend of mine, an old-time friend of mine, who I had got involved with romantically, and we used a lot together, and she had a young son, and they stayed with me at this place I was renting for a couple of months, and we'd had an all-nighter, and she'd gone to work at the pub that she worked at, and she said she was gonna come home right after work. She didn't. And, I was so strung out that I fell asleep on, I was supposed to be looking after the kid. I said I would. And, he had been down for a nap, and I was so strung out that I couldn't wake up when he was crying and screaming. And so until she finally got home with other friends, after she was doing whatever she was doing, and the kid had he pooped in his diaper, and he obviously had been sitting in it for a long time because he had like these sores on his butt, and she packed up and left, and I think that was the moment where I kind of was like, is this what I've become? am I somebody who hurts kids? And I think that was probably the definitive moment that made me realize that something needs to change, right? I didn't quite, there was some steps after that, but I think that was as far as when I knew, like, holy fuck, something's got to change. It was that. It was what have I become? Have I become somebody who hurts kids? Well, my views on recovery were kind of like, that's for nerds, or it's not real, or, it would be boring. There was a number of narratives that I could tell you about, whenever I thought about quitting, because I didn't want to, right? Like, and knowing what I know now about addiction is like, it will do, it's like a living, breathing thing inside of me, and it will tell me anything it has to in my own voice to keep going, to stay alive. Now, as far as my thoughts on sober living, I really had some judgments on people who lived there, and about being weak, and the thought of going into sober living, it made me cringe because there was still this facade, or still this part of my life that I was hanging on to and thinking that I could still get back, about being this totally put together guy with a good job and family, and like, those were the kinds of things that I would think about, like, what would my kids think of me if I was living in sober living, and what would my friends think of me, and all that kind of shit. And those myths, turned out to be at least mostly untrue. There were probably definitely some people who felt that way about me when I wasn't sober living, but by the time I got there, I had done enough work in my recovery that I was just kind of like, well, if that's what somebody thinks of me, then that's what somebody thinks of me, and it really has nothing to do with me. Yeah. As far as the recovery not being fun and nothing fulfilling about it, that turned out to be totally false. Right? I live a simple life, but there's a lot of joy. I have a lot of fun. I have good people. I'm surrounded by a lot of love. I do the things that I enjoy doing, and I do it all without drugs and alcohol, right? Which I thought was impossible. Yeah, I was scared to ask for help, but not because I was scared people wouldn't help me. I think I was more scared that people would, and that I wasn't worthy of it, at least in part. And then the other part of that would have just been purely ego, right? Like, what does it mean about me? What does it say about me if I need to ask for help? That I can't get my own shit together. And I was crushed. It was devastating, but it was liberating all simultaneously. Like, I remember just admitting defeat, that I wasn't going to be able to do this on my own, and I was devastated. It really did a number on my ego, but it was pretty much immediately followed by just a sigh of relief, just knowing that, like, I don't have to keep trying so fucking hard and failing anymore. Like, and then when I did surrender, my process of surrendering was just kind of acknowledging where I was. I had nothing, and I had nobody, and I was facing oblivion. Like, I was getting evicted from my place. I had no plan to get back to work. I had no plan and no resources to be able to see my kids, and I really lost everything. And I kind of sat with myself, and I was just like, this is it. Like, I need to pick whether I want to live or whether I want to die. And I need to pick one, and I need to commit fully, right? And that's where my headspace was. It was, taking my own life was something that I'd considered, right? But, you know, by the grace of by the grace of God, I found a way to quiet down for enough time to listen and find out which of those two I really wanted, and then to just pick life, and then say, okay, then commit. No more half measures, no more half in and out, no more walking the middle of the road. If you want to live, then live, and do whatever it takes to do that. So detox for me was terrifying to start. I was afraid, I was ashamed when I was going in there, when I was in the waiting room waiting for intake. But everyone there at the detox center that I went to, these were true professionals. The people there were so compassionate and so professional, and they really made me feel like we've done this a million times, man, which they have, right? And that, it was important that they made me feel that it was important that I was there. Now, as far as my stay in just the detox center, I mean, because my alcohol withdrawals were a concern, so they sedated me for pretty much 48 hours, so I could get through that, and then the remainder of the days was just kind of relaxing. It was nice to be in that space and know that nothing outside of it really mattered at this point, that I could really truly just be present in what I was doing. And we did I had some good conversations with support groups and with social workers and things like that, and they helped me get into treatment, and then I went on my way. But the experience, oddly enough, was quite pleasant for me. Now, as far as what I believe is the biggest misunderstanding about detox is that it is anything more than to just get you through the withdrawal stage safely, right? Yeah, there is some work that, depending on where you go. Where I went, there was some work that I got to do. But really, it was there to get me through the withdrawal stage, right? In a safe, medically supervised way. And I think that I see a lot of people, in the addiction community, they go to detox, and not just the ones who use some. I mean, some just go in and out, and that's their cycle. But I think some go into it thinking that this is going to fix me, that this is all I need to do. And you know what? I was one of them. Because I went to detox twice, and the first time, that's exactly what I did, right? I went, I did my 6 days, and then I came out feeling like I was cured, right? And then, of course, that didn't last very long. So that was definitely my biggest misconception in the beginning, and it's something that I see in others, that there's a belief that going to a detox center is the cure. What surprised me the most, again, I'd been to a couple of treatment centers at this point, and I did good work in, my first stay. But my biggest shock was to when I went to Thorpe, and I first met with my counselor, and it was still COVID times, and she was masked up, and she was blonde and had these just beautiful blue eyes, and I was looking at her like, oh my God, this is the most beautiful woman I've ever seen, like an angel. And she was so kind, and I just felt like I'm in heaven. And then somewhere throughout our conversation, I can't remember the exact words, but she let me know that, she said something along the lines of, James, you've probably gotten a long way through life on your charm alone. And I can tell you that I will not fall for it. And I think that was just like a big kick in the gut, because my mind was already going there, to like, I wasn't viewing her as someone who can help me. I was objectifying her, and already in my mind, without even really knowing it, I think I was probably, the wheels were turning on, okay, how can I manipulate this person in this situation to get the best outcome I can? And she shut that down right away, and she saw right through me. And we had a great relationship through my stay there after that. She's someone that I admire a lot, and someone that I credit a lot for, what I've been able to do. And I have a lot of respect for her. And part of it comes from that kick she gave me. Like, I'm not falling for your bullshit, buddy. So what did I not expect to get out of treatment? Would be a relationship with God. I definitely did not. That was the big one. Because I went into it not believing in God. Or at least trying really hard not to. And then out of sober living, I'm not sure that there's anything that I can really nail down that I didn't expect to get from sober living, other than maybe some of the connections, right? Like, I've got lifetime friends that I got from my experience in sober living, and a couple lifetime friends that I got out of treatment too, but the brotherhood, right? And we lost a few brothers along the way, but the few of us that are still kicking and still working hard on our recoveries, like, these are men that I share a bond with that is probably not different than a wartime bond, right? These are men that I will love forever. The hardest part about staying clean, for me, was knowing that it meant that I wasn't going to be able to run away from myself anymore. That I wasn't going to be able to run away from uncomfortable situations. I wasn't going to be able to run away from uncomfortable feelings. And I wasn't going to be able to run away from the people I hurt, the things that I had done, the hurtful things I had said and done throughout 22 years of addiction, including my kids, the people I loved most. That, knowing that I was never going to be able to run again was the hardest part about staying clean. And if I'm being honest, I don't have a hard time staying clean anymore, right? I think that because of where my recovery has taken me, and that I have dove into my spirituality. So I'm so committed to diving into the spiritual side of life. That acts as quite a good barrier. So using drugs or alcohol isn't something that really comes up. It's not something that crosses my mind a lot. I don't notice liquor stores when I'm driving around. It doesn't bother me if I'm with people and they're drinking. So the biggest challenges now are finding like-minded people. Yeah. I think that recovery is a spiritual process inherently. But I guess the level of commitment that I've kind of got to as far as my spiritual growth, it's hard to find people that are kind of even interested in the stuff that I have to talk about now. So again, I guess it's still, here I am not being able to run from myself. It means that I had to get comfortable with a lot of solitude. And that doesn't mean being alone, just solitude and being with myself, which used to give me a lot of discomfort. So that was hard, and it's still hard sometimes. It's hard to feel misunderstood sometimes when I try to tell my loved ones about my journey in the spiritual side of things. But everyone's pretty good at least humoring me and just smiling and nodding, and just happy that I am doing well. Well, in early recovery, the structure was very important. And like, I found that as I went from detox to treatment to sober living, the structure was there, but it kind of, each step along the way, the structure lessens just a little bit. And when I was in sober living at Hope House, there was a lot of autonomy supported there, and it was just kind of the perfect mix for where I was at least, right? It doesn't work. Not everybody who comes out of treatment is ready for that kind of freedom, but it worked for me. Where I'm at now, I'm, aside from having to show up to work on time every day, I'm the master of my own schedule, right? And I find that I don't need as much rigidity in my daily routine these days. Now, that all being said, I also share a life with someone who has children of her own, and I have still my kids who I try to see as much as I can, as much as they're teenagers, so as much as they want to see their old dad, but so there's still some structure kind of built into that, just knowing that there are people who depend on me. It's not just me, but these days I don't need a really regimented life. But in early recovery, it was crucial. It was, it seemed like such a pain in the ass, and it was a pain in the ass, but I learned the value of showing up on time for something. I learned the value of keeping a clean and tidy space and staying on top of things like laundry and my hygiene, because I found now that I wasn't hijacking the reward system in my brain with alcohol and cocaine every day. that those little acts were still triggering the reward system in my brain, right? It felt good to get somewhere on time. In treatment, they would give some recognition every week if you made it to all your sessions, all your, like, everything on time. And I think I got it all but once or twice, right? And I was proud of it. And a lot of people there thought it was silly, and it kind of, like, I could see why people would think it was silly, but that's what I had, right? That in that world, in that little contained world, it was like that's what we had, and I was proud of it, right? And that carried over into life outside of treatment. That I can feel proud of myself for being where I need to be and doing what I need to do. I think I touched on it a little earlier, but just like-minded people and how important that is to me. I got a sense of community out of all stages of recovery, right? I felt like I was in a community when I was in Detox. I felt like I was in an even bigger, it was bigger, but because I was there for 3 months in treatment, really got to know some people really well. And they had a community driven model where I was, right? So that just that sense of belonging, and then that carried over into life outside of treatment, where in our sober living house we had, at least for a while, for the first little while, we had a really tight-knit group. It really was a brotherhood. We did a lot of things together. And then, of course, there was the 12-step fellowships, in the area that we were living. We went twice a week to Narcotics Anonymous meetings, and again, that's a whole other community that I didn't even know really existed. I knew about NA, but I had no idea, the friendships that I was going to make inside that program either. So, but in addiction, at least it's my belief that addiction is kind of one manifestation of a spiritual disease of separateness, of just feeling separate. So that sense of belonging and community has probably been my biggest tool, my biggest asset in recovery, is just not being alone, right? Because as I explained earlier, when I hit rock bottom, when I made the decision, I was alone. I had nothing. It was just me. And I was just separate from everything, including myself. And so yeah, that's been the biggest asset. Yeah. Like I had said, I had a sense of community in all stages, but in the sober living, it was a lot more intimate. And we were kind of masters of our own house there, to some degree. So we had to work together. We had to keep the place, in order, and we went grocery shopping together, and, there was an honor system. You don't eat anyone else's food, but we were also tight-knit that we often chipped in and made big meals together. So there was a lot of life-building skills that, I got out of the sober living. The autonomy was big. I didn't have anyone, we didn't have wake-up calls like we did in treatment and stuff. We didn't have announcements over the intercom saying The Narcotics Anonymous meeting is about to start. You got to get there. We didn't have any of that. There was an expectation on all of us to be active in our recovery and attend these meetings and do our step work and do all these things. The expectation was there and it was clear, but it was up to us to make sure it got done. And then I think the other thing that I got from sober living, and this is a credit to where, all sober living is great, but at Hope House it really gave me a sense of dignity back. This is a place that's in a suburb neighborhood. You'd never know it was a sober living house unless you asked somebody. And quiet neighborhood and close to all amenities. And so there was a lot of dignity. I could feel proud of where I lived, and I could also feel pride in keeping the place kind of in good shape. I know a lot of you had mentioned your sober living was a halfway house, and I know a lot of sober living places are in areas that kind of expose people to a lot of addiction triggers, and because of where they are in kind of communities like low income communities or downtown communities that are still where the problem of addiction is very in your face, right? So we didn't have to deal with any of that. So there was a level of safety too. So autonomy, the brotherhood, the safety, and the dignity. Those are the big four things I think that I got out of where I went. It was great a lot of the time. When the house was full of guys who were driven in recovery, it was awesome because, like I had said earlier, like we did so much. We went to the gym together. We went grocery shopping together. We did so much together. And we just really cheered each other on, right? And it was good too to like have someone to lean on that got it, right? Because in recovery, especially in early recovery, but it not only early recovery, it's hard to pick up the phone and ask for help. It's one of the hardest things that somebody can do. Somebody like us can do. But it wasn't that hard to walk across the hall and knock on the door of one of my best friends and tell them I'm fucking struggling. And it wasn't hard for them to do the same, right? So there was that intimacy and that safety of knowing that somebody was right there who got it. What I would say is, what do you got to lose? Right? I think that all of my apprehension about sober living was revolved around the idea that I had something to lose by going into sober living. And that just wasn't true. I had everything to gain. Yeah, 100%. Huge. Because when I got out of treatment, I had done all this work, and my employer had been very good to me, and they were, they put me on disability, and they said, your job is safe, man, as long as you get it right. Take as long as you need and get it right. So I was very fortunate to have that to go back to. But other than that, I didn't know where I was going to live. I didn't know how I was going to be able to afford to start over, right, with nothing. I had no I literally didn't have a pot to piss in. I had, when I left treatment, I had a couple of bags of clothes in my car and my hockey equipment. I knew to save that because probably never would have replaced it. But I left everything else behind. And, it gave me a place. I still had to pay rent, but it was very affordable. And it just gave me a place to call home and kind of integrate back into the real world because of where I was, because it was so affordable, and I didn't have to rush to go back to work full time. That was a key too, because I saw a few guys, rush to go back to work, and it costs them, right? Because this addictive thinking of more, 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 like, oh, I need a job so I can get money and I can get a car and I can do this and I can do that, and then it's just that thought pattern of just hustling, right, and getting more. That's how a lot of relapses start, and I saw it happen to some good friends of mine. So it was nice to be able to have this place to begin my integration process back into the real world after treatment. And, I was able to afford to live while I slowly returned to work. I mean, short answer is yes, of course. What's changed? I mean, I I went into recovery. Like I'd said earlier, I didn't. I thought I didn't believe in God, right? But what I know now about myself is that I was just really trying hard not to because it was too painful. It was too painful to accept the idea that somebody was behind all of this and they really fucked it all up for me. Um, and that, but my idea of God or the universe or creator or whatever one of the 5,000 names that we have for it, it's continuously evolving, right? It'd be a lot easier to tell you what it's not than what it is, and I think that that's probably a good thing, right? It's but it is something that I have grown, I've cultivated a relationship with, and it's a back and forth relationship. I communicate with God, a God of my understanding, and it communicates right back to me in a multitude of ways, right? Sometimes it's from a voice within. Sometimes it's from the people who are coming in and out of my life, and but it's there, right? It's something I can feel, and it's a big part of me now. And I also realize that that was a big hole in my life for a long time too. That because I grew up in a Catholic upbringing, and God was a big part of my life for the early stages of it, and then that stopped because things didn't in my childhood things didn't always go right for me, and it was too hard to bear the idea that there was something that designed all this because it was too painful. So then that I think was a big contributor to all the pain and stuff that led up to me becoming an addict, was that emptiness, right? That disconnect from from a loving God. Spirituality, to me, is actually pretty easy to define by I think spirituality is the nature of my relationship with myself, with my true self. And that's it. I can leave it there comfortably and say that's how I would define spirituality. I've had many spiritual experiences in recovery, and I think if I draw attention back to what I said about recovery being the nature of my relationship with my true self, like I've had many spiritual awakenings and experiences, and sometimes it's something almost cliche and subtle, like being outside in the morning and just getting stuck in a moment of truth where you're just observing nature or looking at the sunrise, and it's just you get this feeling of being I'm right where I need to be right now. And then there's other throughout recovery, especially when I was doing the step work, having these realizations about myself and why I behaved the way I did, and why things like why do I lie so much, right? And admitting that I was a liar is a spiritual experience, and then coming to realize that I lied because it was my brain had been kind of conditioned to think that lying meant survival, that telling the truth I was gonna get hurt, right? Or I was gonna get punished or something like that. So then realizing these things about myself, that's a spiritual experience, because it's getting me more in connection with my true spirit. It's kind of like I don't have to lie anymore, right? I never really enjoyed it. I just did it because it was survival, right? It's like eating. You don't really think about eating, right? You just do it because you need to survive. And that's kind of the same way it worked with why I was such a liar. And realizing those things got me more in touch with myself, and just realizing that I don't have to lie was a big step. And then it turned into I don't want to. I want to tell the truth, even when it sucks. Because sometimes, it still sucks to tell the truth sometimes, right? It can be really uncomfortable, but telling the truth is a spiritual experience in and of itself. And I've had some big ones along the way too. But I'll maybe, one big one that I don't think I'll ever forget was when I was in treatment, and we had a guy who came in every Wednesday, volunteered his time to run an AA meeting in the treatment center with all 60 of us. He'd been doing this for, decades, like really committed guy. I really respected him. He was pretty old school, and some of the shit that he said was kind of off-brand, but I respected the guy. I respected what he was doing. I respected his recovery. And I respected how authentic he was. And I remember him talking about not believing in God, and then coming to the realization that it's not that I didn't believe in God, it's that I resented him. And it was just like this. It just clicked. And that moment, I realized that too about myself. That it's not that I don't believe in God. I'm pissed off at him, right? And like I said earlier, it was too painful to bear the idea that God did this to me. And I resented God. And hearing Sheldon say that and realizing that that's where I had been for, most of my teenage life and all of my adult life could go down as one of the most important spiritual experiences I've ever had, because it's just like a eureka, right? The light bulb goes off and it's just like, that's it. And then it was gone. And my relationship to a God, as I understand it, just grew from that point. What I want my loved ones to know, and I'll say particularly my kids, what I've spent so much energy in talking to my kids. It's been, of course I want them to forgive me, right? But it's not a forgiveness for me. It's not to slough off responsibility. It's not to get absolution for the ways that I've hurt them. More than anything, I just want my kids to understand that my shortcomings as a parent, as a father, as a mentor, as a protector, had nothing to do with them. That there is nothing that they could have done or said differently that would have made me different. And I think that a lot of people, especially kids, but I think most people who really love addicts, they get stuck in that, like, what could I have done? What should I have done? What can, how should I be different? And that's just not how it works. So I think that what I would to people who love addicts, I just want to acknowledge that it's so hard to love an addict, and it takes a lot. But find ways to forgive the addicts that you love, and not for them, but for yourself. Because it's not about you. It's not a failure on your part that your partner or your child or your parent or your sibling can't get well. Everything's going to be okay. I think there's a couple we got to look at what we call help, because you can certainly love an addict to death, right? And I think a lot of people, addicts are manipulators. We are the best of the best manipulators. And the thing about manipulators is they need enablers to function. They need enablers to manipulate. So sometimes the help that someone gives an addict, give them a place to stay, feed them, give them money when they ask for it, there's a level of enabling there that isn't helpful. But there's a balance too. I mean, because it's such a dangerous and lethal disease. So I think that anybody who loves an addict enough to want to help them probably knows a side of them that isn't the addict. And I would say anytime you are going to do something to help, ask which version of them you're helping. Are you helping the addict, or are you helping that version of them that you know is in there? And sometimes saying no is the best thing to do to serve that person that's in there. And then as far as how to be supportive, it just requires a lot of compassion and a lot of curiosity, right? We're a stubborn bunch. We don't like being told what to do, and when we are told what to do, we'll tune out immediately. So we don't respond well to the wagging of the fingers, saying, you should do this different, you should do that. How could you do this to us? We don't respond to that. And we require a lot of compassion because we don't want to be like this either, right? I can't recall a single time when I was in the grips of addiction. Not when I'm high and partying and having a great time, but the morning after, when all the money's gone, when everybody's gone, you've been on a 7-day bender and kids don't know where you are, and I've never been in that situation and been like, man, this is great. There's a lot of despair in there. So compassion goes a long way. And again, there's the fine line between being compassionate and being an enabler. And I think that loving addicts to death is a real problem. And I don't think you can hate an addict to death. We do a good enough job of that on our own. So, but I'm not saying hate them, but just the balance. Find the compassion, understand that we're sick people, and if we could do better, we would. And then who are you serving? Are you serving the addict, or are you serving the being inside of there, behind all of that? And sometimes that means saying no. It's hard to think of what to say, because often, at least when I was at that stage, I was convinced, right? There was nothing that anybody could have said to me that was going to convince me otherwise. So, I can say things about how great recovery is, and it is, but I think the best way to say it is to be it. In this case, I think that by just being in recovery and seeing what my life has become in recovery, in just a couple of short years, I just lead by example. I don't think that anything that I could say would ever land as well as just being it. I've gained everything, and I love everything. And I know that sounds crazy, but you know, I if look at tangible things like I in two and a 2.5 years of recovery, I mean, I've got my life back. I still have my job, but I mean, I've just got a raise. I I have this wonderful partner who we just got engaged. You know, I'm getting married. Um, New relationships that are meaningful. Some of my old relationships, like the ones I want back, I haven't got them. I haven't got there with everyone, and everyone takes their own time. And I might not get some of them back, but I'm okay with that. Right? There's nothing I can do about it. But the relationships that I do have growing now are healthy and reciprocal and wonderful, and I kind of my my relationship with my kids is slowly but surely, steadily improving all the time. So, all of these things that I do have, I owe to my recovery. I would not have any of them without it. I'd probably be dead without it by now. But, I have, like, financially, I'm secure. Like, emotionally, I'm secure. Spiritually, I'm secure. And even when, the day-to-day life bullshit comes up, it's just like, okay, let's get through this one and on to the next one, right? There's no dread. There's nothing I dread in this life anymore. And that's that's everything. That mean I'm able to be present in this moment and like where I am and like who I am. And that's all a person really needs. Anything else I can get through. Anything else is just chopping wood and carrying water. I don't miss it at all. I don't miss a thing. There's parts of my life that were going on at the same time as my addiction, like having a family and like living with my kids. Of course, I'd miss that part. But as far as the life I left behind, the life of just absolute chaos. There was a time when I thought that like I wasn't going to be able to have fun, but I have lots of fun now, right? And there's not a thing that I can think of that I would want back from that. I had some good times, right? I have some good memories and some good stories that I can laugh with my friends about and all those kinds of things, but I don't miss a fucking thing. Hope is just one silly story that you're telling yourself away from being possible. I don't know if that made sense. Hope is the glue between every step taken in recovery. It's always there. In between. The good stuff, the bad stuff, the hard stuff, the easy stuff, all the shit, all this muck you gotta walk through in recovery, all the clouds you're gonna walk on in recovery. In between every step of that, hope is the glue. If you think you can't do this, it's probably because you think you have to do it alone. So don't even try. Don't even try to do it alone. And not because you can or can't, but because you don't have to. Because there are literally millions of people out there, like me, that will help, that have been there, and that want to help. And because it truly is a miracle to watch and every single addict, no matter what you've done or didn't do, every single addict deserves recovery.